And I feel like it's what I've noticed, at least in my conversations with people on the other side of the issue, is that a lot of times it seems like people favor misrepresenting like what's actually being said or argued by a certain paper or journal or article or text, like textual evidence. That seems to be like a running thing in my experience.
I'm lately, the last like 5 years, I've turned my practice to, I used to just debunk things, right? But in the last about 5 years, I've switched to not just debunking false claims, but analyzing the methodology of the false claim. Like, what did they do that got them this false result? And I'm starting to notice patterns when people, like cranks, Christian apologists, political apologists, conspiracy theorists, they all use a similar toolbox of methods. And I'm starting to gather these together. And I've got a lot of articles in my blog giving examples. And well, 3 of the very common principles are very typical of all apologetics, all conspiracy theory arguing, all bad scholarship, all crankery, is first, rule 1, strawman. So rather than steelman, rather than make the opponent's position as strong as possible and then address that, you distort the position and make it weak, so it's easy to attack the weak version, which is not the real version. So straw manning, you first do straw man. Second, you conceal evidence, leave evidence out. So you don't do a thorough test. You don't go look for evidence against your position. You don't go look for evidence supporting your opponent. Things that are inconvenient or that will change the equation, you leave out. And usually they'll just leave it out. Sometimes they'll outright lie and say it doesn't exist. But one way or another, you'd leave out key evidence that would reverse the conclusion. And this I have, for people who are interested, look for my Bayesian counter-apologetics article. I show this for 10 arguments for God. Every single one of them, if you put back in the evidence that the apologist is leaving out, their argument for God flips into an argument against God. And that just shows you exactly what apologetics is doing. They're leaving out evidence to flip the evidence, flip the argument the opposite way, contrary to reality. And it hinges on this, leaving evidence out. What has been left out? Always ask, has anything been left out? Are they leaving stuff out? Is there stuff I should check here? So straw man, leaving stuff out, and then working the wrong way around. So I already mentioned that before, going at it backwards, starting with the conclusion and then making the evidence fit the conclusion, rather than treating your conclusion as a hypothesis and testing the conclusion. And to test it scientifically, that means trying to falsify it. Sincerely, genuinely, competently trying to falsify it. For 2 reasons. One is, if you then falsify it, well, now you've saved yourself. Now you know, like, okay, I had a bad idea, right? You've corrected your beliefs towards reality. Or if you fail, like you try to prove it false, really sincerely, competently try to prove it false and you fail, that is actually the only way to prove that it's likely true. So that is how you prove, that's how you get confident in something, is that you've tried really hard to disprove it. It didn't track out. And so that's how you know that it's a believable claim. So properly testing hypotheses rather than starting with the conclusion and trying to make the evidence fit it, that's the proper way to do methodology. The apologist does it the other way around. And I see Chrissy Hansen does the apologetics thing a lot. Another thing she does is the argument from prestige. She does this a lot, like, your publisher, your academic publisher, your peer-reviewed publisher is not prestigious enough, right? Christian apologists do that all the time, right? Listen, that's not prestigious enough to count. That's not how a scholar works. That's how an apologist works. Scholars say, yeah, that's a peer-reviewed thing. It's got to be taken seriously. That's a real publisher. That's not a paper mill. It's not a book mill. Like, that's a real academic publisher that does proper peer review. Doesn't matter how prestigious it is. It's irrelevant. Or arguing that some particular person is prestigious. So like she did with Neusner. Like Neusner, yeah, he's like one of the most famous Jewish scholars, like scholars of Judaism. In the 20th century, right? That's true. It's interesting. What does it have to do with the point she was making there, right? Like, so it's like there's somehow the prestige of Neusner somehow makes his opinion more reliable, when opinions are only reliable or not reliable if they have the evidence, right? It's evidence or GTFO, right? So it doesn't matter how prestigious you are. It doesn't even matter if you're peer reviewed. It does matter if you have the evidence, right? So it's relevant to her argument there that Neusner was an expert and not some rando and not some crank, right? So the fact that he endorsed Magné's book didn't balk at the Magné daring to suggest that maybe possibly there wasn't a Jesus. That's relevant, but it's only relevant because Neusner is a qualified expert, right? It's not relevant because he's prestigious. His prestige is irrelevant, right? All that matters is he competent? Does he have the degrees? Does he have the background? That's it. And he does, right? So that's the kind of thing. That's another thing you see a lot of this argument from prestige, this idea that your publisher is not prestigious enough, you're not prestigious enough, the people who agree with you aren't prestigious enough. Like if that's how you're arguing, you're not a scholar, you're an apologist at that point, right? And it's because we see Christian apologists, they did that all the time in the resurrection debates throughout the last 20 years, right? People who've seen like William Lane Craig or any of these other people, they often wheel out, well, this particular prestigious scholar said such and such, and who are you, right? Like that's the argument they'll make. That's not a scholarly argument. That's an apologetic argument. So that's like 4 different things to look for, and Hansen does that a lot, and it's frustrating.